Jiho. I would like to ask you on the topic of the adoption of agentic AI seems not to be living up to its hype. How do you view the challenges that enterprises face when adopting these kind of technologies? And also, how do you view the hot topic of MCP, the opportunities and the challenges that people might face when adopting it? Thank you.
You know, it's very interesting that you say it's not living up to this hype. A year ago, Agentic AI used to be a technical term, and tell about what it means, where technologists were building agentic workflows, meaning iterative workflows that deliver a much better result. I feel like from the technologist perspectives, it's going great. We built so many applications using agentic workflows for medical diagnosis, to process legal documents, for routing logistics. So there's so many applications where it's working so well. Now, what did happen is about 6 months ago, a bunch of marketers in large companies got a hold of the name and they started putting it everywhere. And maybe that created unrealistic expectations. There are definitely some large companies, that was widely known that their marketing is far ahead of the actual technology. But that's one perspective. I'll say from the startup application builder perspective, is actually working very well. And there's so many applications we built that perform much better with agentic workflows.
MCP. MCP. I think MCP is a very nice technology. It's a very good way to let AI models get access to tools.
I think it's the early phases of development. Whether the world will standardize on MCP, I think remains to be seen, but I think it's a nice technological development. And as another example, I see people also discussing ACP, Agent Communication Protocol, where we try to have agents talk to each other. I think it's a little bit too early to know exactly what standard will win out, but I think these are good ideas.
Thank you. This is Ting Fang with Nikkei. Yes, so I hope to ask you, because you write an analysis right after the DeepSeek went out earlier this year, and you talk about scaling up is not the only path for AI. Do you, and then you also think that the model is it's helpful and then it contributes a lot, whether you still think that until now. And my second question is that a lot of governments now kind of concerned even linking the open source API of this DeepSeek, and then some companies also concerned whether use that open source is secure or not, and really keen to hear what you think.
So, I think DeepSeek is on one hand, is a wonderful technical contribution to the technical community, and then on the other hand, it also has geopolitics and soft power implications that I think are still being sorted out in terms of when people use these models, will they reflect the views of the nation or the company that released these models? So maybe I think DeepSeek was I think that open source or open waste models is a key part of the AI supply chain now, so companies will use it. Right now, China has been leaping ahead in terms of models like DeepSeek and Qwen, which are very good models. So whether or not those of us from places that are democracies can also make sufficient investments to participate strongly in the open weight supply chain, I think remains to be seen. In terms of security problems, I think there are a lot of businesses that are still quite conservative and will not even use the OpenAI API or other APIs controlled by American companies because of cloud on-prem types of concerns. It's not surprising that some companies are concerned from a security point of view of DeepSeek. I think there is the whose views are we promoting concern. That's a very important question. So long as a copy of DeepSeek is hosted by your own computer, by a company that you control, I think the security worries can be much lower. And I definitely see startup businesses, lots of startups, using Qwen and DeepSeek because they are good models. And
Just a very quick follow-up. So because every companies or even the persons right now hope to catch this AI wave, But now like every company have the ability to develop their own LLMs. So basically, they probably need to choose to work with different APIs. Or what are the advices you are giving them to not like being left behind or left out of this AI race?
So for most businesses, the value will be at the application layer. So take AI models that others have spent billions of dollars to train and that we can now access for free or very cheaply and use it to build valuable applications in our various vertical sectors. I think when my teams build AI applications, we tend to architect them to not be locked into one LM provider. We often build our software to make sure that if the best AI model in 3 months or 6 months changes, we can very quickly swap in a different AI model. And then I think there is an important question to be asked of will Taiwan, will the US, will, it turns out India has been investing in its own open weight models as well. And what would the future be like if China dominates the open model supply chain? And is that the right place for the world to go to? I think those are the questions that are being asked. I feel like many nations would do well to increase investments in AI, especially the infrastructure layer, the foundation model layer, that creates a basis for many people to build valuable applications on top.
Thank you. We have a question here.
I have 2 questions. The first question is that it is said DeepSeek's breakthrough is made possible by U.S. companies' open source projects. So do you think the U.S. companies should limit their open source scope, or the U.S. government should intervene to regulate open source projects? And my second question is that we know AI Fund has established a footing in Taiwan, and your deep learning AI and landing AI also have a lot of cooperation with Taiwanese companies such as Foxconn. So is there any new breakthrough you can share with us? Thank you.
So the government should absolutely not limit their companies from releasing open source software. What happens is open source accelerates circulation of knowledge within a country, and while it can help others as well, you help yourself much more with open source than not. And I think also there is this soft power question of if the world uses a certain country's open source models, open weight models, then that country actually has a lot more influence in the world, because when someone asks a question of AI model about territorial boundaries or about sensitive political events, if the world is using your AI model, then your AI model will more likely give an answer that reflects your values. It's a tremendous source of influence and soft power. I think in the US there have been large companies that have spent a lot of money training AI models that have been changing their arguments every few months to shift, to try to argue for regulations to stifle open source and open weight models. About 1.5 years ago, the argument was AI is so dangerous it could kill us all. When that lost credibility, the argument became AI could create bioweapons. When that lost credibility, because we studied it, the latest argument as well, because China. I think all of these have been really misleading arguments driven by the economic interests of a small number of companies that do not want to compete with open source. If these efforts succeed, almost everyone will lose out. It may help a few businesses in the US establish monopolies. It'd be good for a small number of US businesses, but it'd be bad for almost everyone else in the world if governments step in to stifle open source and open way software. I think AI Fund and Deep Learning, I don't have a specific announcement right now, but I think our team in Taiwan continues to grow and are building companies and building software. So, but no announcement on that today.
你前面有个问题好像不是说比如说 infrastructure 上，
让我你再问一次，你要不要再问一次？
没有就是
Hello, I'm Dennis from Agentic. I got 2 questions. The first is that we're seeing 2 directions in developing foundation models. One is common law, and another is reasoning model. And in your view, which of these paths is going to sustain, or both will still continue to play a role? And the second is how important is voice technology agents or agentic workflow? Thank you.
Yeah. So there's actually one interesting thing that's happened in the media environment, which is there's a small number of foundation model training companies, large language model companies, that have such powerful PR machinery that they have very successfully skewed how everyone perceives AI. So some of these companies, so I would say scaling laws and reasoning models, both of them are very important. But I think the societal perception of the importance of them is greater than it actually is, because AI today is a portfolio of many, many different tools. But the foundation model companies, in their ability to drive PR, hype, fundraise, they focus so much attention on just these two that it's warped societal's perception. Scaling laws are important. I think they'll continue to work for a little bit, but again, really difficult to keep working. I think reasoning models are a big deal. They could do certain problems, like math and very technical STEM problems, much better than non-reasoning models, but they're also not magic. It turns out that for a lot of business judgment questions, right? Things that are not math and coding, reasoning models are not magic. The scaling laws for training larger models seems to work for a very broad set of disciplines. Reasoning models, it tends to work really well for the quantitative disciplines where there's a black and white truth, right? And then for things like business judgment, scaling laws works, but reasoning models is still not clear how much they help. So, but beyond that, I think agentic workflows is very important, and the techniques for building applications is much greater than just scaling laws and reasoning models.
Voice technologies impact on agentic workflow, voice interaction.
Yeah, so sure. So maybe some of the things I think are happening. I think the voice stack is becoming much better. So using multiple companies' models is much easier to build voice-based agents or voice-based tools than it used to be before. So voice is not for everyone, but for a lot of customer service chatbots, for a lot of user interfaces, where it's easier to let a computer, to let a user talk with a voice, it's much easier to build applications than it used to be. And then the other one I often think about is the visual AI workflow, where the ability of computers to perceive pictures is much bigger than it used to before. So previously, if you want to recognize a water bottle, you have to take pictures, label a lot of data, train a model. Now you can just type water bottle, right, straight from something, and just find it for you. One piece of images that maybe is the most important is actually documents. Human society, we generate more than 1 trillion pages of documents per year, so there's so much documents, and it turns out documents is a visual representation of information. So visual AI is getting to the point where we can be really good at extracting information from medical forms, insurance records, healthcare records, PDF slide presentations of graphs and charts to extract out visual information for processing. So for agentic document extraction, maybe the most valuable type of picture maybe is pictures of documents, right? Kind of PDF documents. So our ability to process all of these documents that we have, that for the most part would not be able to get value out of, I think that will also be a big change. So the thing about AI technology is not one technology, it's a lot of different things, including voice stack, visual AI, and then also other things like video generation, right? Agentic workflows, very custom tool use. So I think there were so many ways to improve AI technology in addition to scaling those and reasoning models.
Hello, Doctor. I'm Timothy from Manager Today, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And your article mentioned both 10x engineers and 10x professional in other domains. My question is, how might the concept of 10x professionals change traditional team structures and collaboration models in organization? And I have another question, is you argue strongly that programming skills remain essential despite AI advances. What specific programming concepts should business professionals prioritize learning to remain competitive?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think that what we're seeing in software engineering with 10x engineers is we wound up reorganizing teams, knowing that sometimes the best person to make a decision is the engineer rather than the manager. Because sometimes there'll be someone, often there'll be someone on my team that knows more than I do about their business domain, and it's important that I don't try to make the decision, but empower them to make the decision. The other trend is when we have lots of highly empowered individuals across our teams, putting in place the data architecture to get them the information they need to make a good decision becomes more and more important. I think in a purely top-down organization, the most important thing is make sure the boss has all the information, the boss makes the decision, everyone else just does what they're told. But if we have highly empowered individuals, then it's important to have the data flow to the right place in the company so that the individuals throughout the organization can make the decisions that they are now able to make. Since all of you are reporters, just one example. On my team, we have a former Riot journalist. His name's Tim. He wrote code in order to scrape RSS news feeds in order to flag to him every day what are the most important stories he should pay attention to. And so this is a reporter, and he learned to code, and then by writing software, he is able to do his job in journalism better. So I think in many different job roles. And the fact and the idea of scraping RSS feeds, I would never have thought of this. There's no way I could have asked him to do this. It was his idea because he understood the workflow of reporters, and so he could invent new software. And it was really AI-assisted coding that made it possible for him to take his knowledge that I don't have, and then to do something of his own initiative that I could never have thought of asking him to do. And so as we start to learn 10x professionals in many businesses, I think with software companies, we learn you can't have a purely top-down structure because often the boss doesn't know enough to just make top-down decisions. You have to empower people everywhere to make good decisions. I think this will be an important shift as well of how we organize teams. And then in terms of what to learn about programming, I think one common thing I see is people that are programmers would probably made it seem more mysterious than it needs to be. A pretty common thing I see is when someone that's not a programmer learns the code, they go, oh, that wasn't so hard. Why did you make it sound so hard? And so there are programming, there are a lot of concepts. How do you write code? How do computers work? How can computers use AI? How do you organize software? There is many weeks of learning. You can't learn it in 1 or 2 hours. I think there is definitely many, many weeks of learning, but it's probably less difficult than most people think to learn enough about coding to do very meaningful things, and with the help of AI, write meaningful applications that hopefully work.
Good afternoon. This is Carol from Business Next. I have 2 questions here. The first one is that we know that there are more and more AI-built services or AI-built apps. But lots of them are more like testing projects rather than instead of real-life products. So I would like to know, in your opinion, what's the meaning of this kind of works, and how can AI building stuff being responsible? And my second question is
being responsible.
Because they're more like testing projects. So maybe I just developed an AI app and upload it to App Store, and but it's more like AI building things, and it doesn't have the company behind it. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if more and more this kind of apps comes up, and how can we make them being responsible, and who is going to take responsibility of it? Yes, and then the second question is that lots of companies think it's more important to have cheaper and suitable model for their context. So I'm curious that.
So have cheap models?
Cheaper models. So I'm curious that what do you think of that? Is chasing the larger size model is still important nowadays?
So I think it's great that there's AI builder software that is lowering the cost and complexity of writing software. If you look at the history of computing, we went from punch cards, which are really difficult to use, to keyboards and terminals. And then we went from low-level assembly language to higher languages like COBOL and Fortran and C, C++. And we went to, then we had IDEs and now AI-enabled coding. And every step along the way, it lowered the cost of writing software. And as the cost of writing software went down, more people were able to do it. And so the number of people that program kept on growing. AI-assisted coding and these types of software like Replit, Bolt, Vercel, as well as coders, IDEs like Corsair and Windsurf, all of these are making the cost of software even cheaper. And what will happen is we will see a lot more software out in the world, which I think is great. I think in terms of how the make sure is responsible, maybe just as the internet allowed a lot more people to publish things online, so we got a lot more online text, including a lot of text that maybe was not professionally written and it's problematic. I think we'll see that as well. But just as the internet made communication much better, I think lowering the cost of coding will also let there be a lot more software written, because the demand for custom software has no practical ceiling. I think there's so many little apps that many of us wish we had, but we can't, it just doesn't make sense to hire a very expensive software engineer to build it. But if the cost is much lower, there'll be so many more little applications that all of us could use. Maybe some examples. One day on the weekend, my daughter wanted to practice multiplication tables. And so, I took like an hour to write software to print out flashcards for her to practice multiplication tables, right? If it had taken me a day to do it, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have done it. But because it took an hour, I could write this very small piece of software with AI's help that then helps my daughter, have fun with my daughter. So this is an example of a very low economic value application, right? Print out flashcards for one person. That then became economic to build. And I see many teams now able to write software for one person rather than have these very large companies write software. You better sell it to tens of thousands of people for it to make sense. Sorry, and the second question is chief models, right? Yeah. So just as in the compute realm, we have very powerful GPUs and CPUs in the data centers, less powerful ones in desktop and laptop, even less powerful ones, in my smartwatch. So because work is different, we do very different tasks. My smartwatch does much smaller tasks than what we do in the data center. So we have a huge range of different compute infrastructure, CPUs and GPUs. In the same way, the level of intelligence needed for different tasks is very different. If all you need to do is do grammar checking, that's quite easy. If you need to reason about very difficult math problems, that's very difficult. So because the nature of work is diverse, in the future, I'm pretty sure we'll use a range of very different size of models as well, depending on the problem or application you're trying to solve. Just as we do today, using lots of different compute devices, depending on the problem you're trying to solve.
Hi, this is Chris from inside Media again. You just said this is the best time for kids because they have AI. But however, we have seen the American college students helping software engineers using AI to cheat in Google interview. My question is, how do you think our education system should be restored in this time, in this year, in this AI age?
Yeah, I think because AI started to be available relatively quickly, I think we're still sorting out what to do. In terms of the educational system, one of the biggest challenges is the future of work will be different. Well, when our students graduate, they will have AI assistants to help them with their work. And so universities are still thinking through how can we prepare students not for the jobs available 2 years ago or even the jobs available today, but the jobs that they will be expected to do in the future with AI assistants. So I think we should teach students to use AI responsibly rather than to teach them to do things that in the future they really should be getting AI to do for them. but university curriculum tends to change slowly, so I think that's still in the works. And then it turns out that in education, some productive struggle is important for learning. So for example, when my daughter is learning math, I ask her to do it with her brain, not with a calculator. Now, fortunately, because my daughter is 6 years old, I can just not buy a calculator for her, and she does have access to one. For college students, I think it is harder to tell a college student to not use something they can access on the internet. So how to set the rules so that people have the productive struggle and the challenges to develop their skills rather than AI do it for them, so they don't need to learn the things that they need to know. I think we're still sorting it out now.
好，最后一题。好，开始。
So I have another question on the educational front. So based on your observation and experience with online education platforms such as Udemy, so I'm wondering how effective has AI been in assisting student learning or supporting teachers in their instruction so far? What have been some hurdles, and do you worry that students or teachers might become over-reliant on AI?
So the data I've seen so far for both Deep Learning and Coursera is AI assistance for students is very helpful. So we can provide AI to help answer students' question, but without giving away the answer. And so rather than needing to, especially for online education, sometimes it's difficult to find an expert to ask a question of if you're stuck, or even on-campus education. Sometimes it takes a while to find a person to ask a question of. So having AI assistants that knows to help you along, but not necessarily give the final answer, that's been very helpful. All of our data shows that it helps students engage and complete courses better. In terms of how AI can help teachers, other than answering student questions, I think there are a lot of little use cases that people are experimenting with. For example, AI-enabled auto-grading to give feedback to students quickly and at scale. That relieves work for the teacher while also helping the students get feedback faster. One of our teams, an AFN portfolio company called Kira Learning, has done one thing that's especially interesting, which is in the state of Tennessee, in the United States, we have gym teachers teaching computer science. And the way that was possible was because the platform provides a lot of content and AI assistance, so software can provide a lot of the subject matter expertise. But then the gym teacher, who is sometimes learning computer science alongside the student, provides the really important social emotional support. So the teacher is the coach, encourages the student, helps them keep going, but they don't need to know all of the subject matter expertise of computer science. And so I don't know if this is the right model for all educational systems. For K-12, having the teacher provide social emotional support seems important, but I think we're still, a lot of teams, including us and others, are still experimenting with the best way to use AI to help teachers.
All right, thank you very much. I think we